You've spoken about the challenges you faced while you were a student, and specifically your time as a self-described college dropout.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk a little bit about why you dropped out and what factors influenced your decision to return?
Oh, man. That was rough. When I came to college, financially I had no business coming to college. I was came from a poor family. I was mostly raised by my grandparents. Neither my grandparents nor parents really had the finances for me to stay all 4 years. I figured I would get in the door because I had scholarships my first year. I had worked in high school. I used up all my savings for that. And the plan was I would apply for in-state residency, and then financial aid would cover it once I was paying the lower tuition rates. But basically a bunch of things happened and just everything kind of went wrong. In-state residency application was denied because, I didn't get my license until a few months after I got here. I wasn't eligible to vote, so I couldn't register until my spring semester. That's one of the factors they look at. Well, hell, I'm 17. My parents, there's an affidavit that you're supposed to sign saying you no longer live with your parents, which I didn't. My parents wouldn't sign the affidavit, but then also wouldn't give me their tax information for the FAFSA in a timely fashion because they filed an extension, didn't file until August. Well, the FAFSA priority deadline is March 1st. So what happened was that by the end of my freshman year, I really have no way at all to pay for my sophomore year. The financial aid just is not there. I got a D+ in Calculus 2 my first semester because I was a dummy and took it at 805. I then used the first year course repeat policy for the spring semester and somehow managed to get an F. So they erased the D+ and put an F in its place. So my GPA now isn't where it needs to be. So all of this is going on. So when I get to my sophomore year, there's a guy named Rex Foster who was working in the cashier's office. Great guy. He really kind of took pity on me. He said, look, okay, here's what we're going to do. You have absolutely no way to pay for this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to let you register for class. We'll take the financial aid that we can. I want you to reapply for in-state residency. If that doesn't work, appeal it. If they give it to you, we'll backdate it. So that way financial aid will cover everything. Well, I ended up sophomore year, same pickle. Don't have the affidavit from the parents, don't have the tax information, I'm kind of SOL. So I applied again, appealed, that was denied. So I ended up, end of my sophomore year, I owe NC State about $15,000, give or take a few. And I go into his office and I'm like, dude, I owe State 15 grand. Got no way to pay it, what do I do? He goes, I'll make some calls, see what I can work out, you see what you can work out. I had started working full-time at the time, which, again, in hindsight, another dumb decision. I was working at the Burger King on Avon Ferry, and then on the side I was working as a campus representative for Apple Computer. So I'm working all this, trying to make this money to pay tuition, not going to class, more bad grades because I'm not going to class, not making enough at the jobs to pay tuition. I didn't think it through, clearly. So basically what happened was, we get to June of 2000. I had enrolled in summer school to try and get my grades back up. And this was around the time where there was an audit going on because I guess the public safety department had been using lapsed salary money to hire officers and instead buying a lot of technology. They had just installed cherry hardwood furniture in the police department. It was just a lot of stuff going on. The bond campaign was going on at that time. And, I got a call into the cashier's office saying, look, we love you, we wish we could help, but there's nothing here we can really do for you. You owe 15 grand, we got to cancel your housing, we got to cancel your classes, we got to cancel your meal plan, you got to go. So what ended up happening was, middle of June, I told all my professors I was in summer school with, I was like, sorry, I can't finish this class. And, from that time period, from June until September, I was homeless. I had nowhere to go. My parents were up in Connecticut. They really didn't have the money to have another grown man living with them, and that would leave. I would have no chance of ever coming back to NC State had I gone up there. My grandparents couldn't afford me to come back, so really, I went to the homeless shelter on Wilmington Street. And, back then, this was before Raleigh renovated it. So it's like this massive warehouse that looks like it's falling apart. You line up at 4 o'clock. You see, crackheads and meth addicts and people that should be getting treatment but don't. That's essentially Raleigh's homeless population. Here I am, this 18-year-old college kid who, clean cut, looks normal. Everyone's kind of giving me the raised eyebrow. So what ended up happening was, I'm like, I can't do this. So during the day, I would sleep in my truck, get up in the evening, get one of my friends to let me in the Carmichael to shower. I was working at the Taco Bell and Tally to try and make money. And then at night, DHL was open 24 hours back then. So I would come in before they were checking IDs and literally stay here overnight. I would stay awake all night long, check out a laptop from the reference desk, and would just, do research online, just randomly reading whatever to occupy myself until it was daylight again. So that was kind of the background, the lead up. I just couldn't afford to continue. And essentially what happened was that there was a young lady that I was dating at the time who she and I met through student government. And in September of that year, she had her financial aid refund and said, look, let's take half of it. We'll get an apartment together. You work to pay the bills until I finish college. We'll flip-flop and go from there. And that was what kind of started me on my path towards eventually getting on my feet financially. In terms of why I came back, it was really just one of those things where I had failed as comprehensively as someone can fail. High school scholar, here at 17, failed classes as a freshman, failed more classes as a sophomore, ran for office and lost, then essentially got booted because I couldn't afford it. Like, you cannot screw up more aggressively than I screwed up. And it just bothered the daylights out of me for 5 years. I'm like, I refused to let NC State beat me. That was how I framed it in my mind. It wasn't that I was incompetent and hadn't thought everything through. It was, this is NC State's fault. I refuse to let NC State beat me. So, I've been working all these jobs, had established a fairly decent resume. We get to June of 2005. I'm working with a law firm in Durham, and the firm decides that they're going to split up because the partners, I guess, didn't like each other. They're going to split to like 3 different firms. And part of me is like, okay, no big deal. Part of me is like, this is not a stable job environment. I got to go. So I reached out to the cashier's office. I sent them an email. I can't remember who was over there at the time that I talked to. I know I eventually ended up talking with Maria Brown, but I said, look, I owe you guys like 17 grand at this point with interest. You're not getting paid until I can get a job where I can make real money. I'm not going to get a job making real money until I have a degree. So here's an Excel spreadsheet. I will pay you all $550 once a month, every month from now until 2.5 years later when I'll graduate. You'll be paid off. I'll pay all of my tuition up front because I'm now an independent. I can take out whatever student loans I need. Can we cut a deal? And the email I got back was, when we agreed to discuss this idea with you, it was designed to be a discussion where you paid us everything up front, not span us out over 2 years. But we'll take a chance on you. So I ended up registered for class, registered late for housing, talked with them, said, hey, can I get on campus? So I make sure I go to class every day. And that was how I got back in the door. So August of 2005, I'm now a student again, got my Unity account reactivated. My very first email is to the young lady I've been dating saying, hey, how does it look having an ncsu.edu account again? It was like the coolest thing ever. And my first semester back, I actually made Dean's List for like the first time in my life. That's how stoked I was to be back on campus.
As a student senator, you authored and sponsored many bills, including the Student Media Independence Referendum and a bill that supported the establishment of a campus LGBT center. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about your decision to support these bills?
Well, the student media thing, when I ran for president my freshman year and lost, a bunch of folks apparently not only voted for me, but wrote me in all of the blank spots on the ballot. So I ended up getting written in to be on the Student Media Authority. I think it's now the Student Media Board of Directors, but back then it was called the Student Media Authority. And not only did I get into that by the write-ins, I actually got more votes than people that were actually on the ballot. So it was just the weirdest thing in the world. I've spent my freshman year attacking how the media portrays student government, and now I'm on the board governing the media. It was just odd. But what ended up happening was that that year, I feel there's controversy followed me. That was the year that the Nubian Message got in trouble because they had been taking News and Observer stories and just putting staff reports and actually printing them in the Nubian Message. And the student members on the board were just like, this is outrageous, we need to disband the Nubian Message. The media folks were like, this is outrageous, we need to fix the Nubian Message. And it would just become this huge thing. And it got so big that several of the student members quit. And there was this weird vagaries going on with the different organizations' constitutions where the Senate was supposed to send people to replace them, but the Student Media Authority was able to approve the replacements. So the Senate was sending over like these hardcore Republicans who had wrote for Broadside Magazine, like these are the guys we're going to put on. The student media, now that the students have quit, the media heads outnumber the students. Media heads said, look, we know exactly what you're going to try and do. You're trying to stack the board to disband the newbie, and we refuse to approve these people. And it just kind of like became the stalemate between the two. So that whole year, all of this is going on. When I came back, I'm like, there should be no ties at all whatsoever between the media and the government. If you want to have a board of directors that the media says they're going to pick who's on it, great, more power to you, but that kind of thicket of issues we had in 2000 should never, ever, ever happen again. So when I was a senator, the 2006-2007 year, I worked with Bradley Wilson over in Student Media and said, look, we're going to put a referendum on the ballot to eliminate Article 5 because that was what created the Student Media Authority. We're just going to remove it. Y'all figure out how you're going to replace it. I don't care. I don't want that in the student body constitution. So that was the one for that one. The LGBT Center, that was, that kind of came about differently. I can't remember what triggered it that particular year. There was something going on that really kind of sparked a lot of community interest. And one of the senators who was really kind of like the main guy pushing, his name's Matt Potter. He's a really good friend of mine. But politically, he and I are like polar opposites. He's a big-time advocate for marijuana use, very laissez-faire, as far as socially issues. Whereas I was kind of like, I was the libertarian of the group. I don't really care about the social issues. Fiscally, I'm a hardcore conservative. But people kind of appreciated the fact that I told you what I thought. So he said, hey, I want this done. How can we make it happen? And I said, well, look, let's work it out. You represent one spectrum, I represent the other. We'll put it together and make it happen. Because, you've got centers on campus for everything else. You've got the African American Culture Center, you've got the Women's Center, you've got all these different centers for all these different groups. And you've got a sizable number of people in the LGBT community that have nowhere to go. And I'm like, regardless of whether or not you happen to be gay or you have friends who are gay or you don't like gays, none of that really matters. If you're going to provide something for everyone else, you kind of really got to do it for this really significant piece of the community. And that was how I approached it. From a personal standpoint, again, it's one of those things where I just don't care. But I felt like it was the right thing to do with everything else we had going on. And I figured that because folks respected that I was blunt with what I had to say, I was so old at that point that I had no future political aspirations. I wasn't planning on ever being Senate President. I was just going to be the old guy sitting in the back that knew all the rules. That was what I was planning to do. I said, okay, well, sure. I will happily help make this happen. So that was kind of the initiative for it.